If you were to ask someone today what main events led to racial equality, they might answer you with the 13th Amendment, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, Rosa Parks' actions, or maybe just the abolishment of the Jim Crow laws in general. Our regretful reality, however, is that the Jim Crow laws were never truly passed away. In other words, they have just been passed under the more sophisticated name given to it by Michael Alexander, author of The New Jim Crow, named as the racial caste system. The racial caste system is defined in the New Jim Crow as a culmination of social control where people of color are kept in an inferior position, which in our case is mass incarceration system that deprives ex-convicts of their rights and opportunities to meet end means. This in turn forces our ex-convicts to return to a former life of crimes, thus creating the loop of the racial caste system. Our earlier models of the racial caste system included slavery, segregation, poverty, and now mass incarceration. And just as the racial caste system targets those of people of color, so does the criminal justice system. The NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, stated that people of color are 5 times more likely to be incarcerated than that of a non-colored skinned person. They also said that people of color make up 40% of all correctional facility population, while only attributing to a measly 14% of the total population. These statistics blatantly depict the correlation between one's skin color and one's likeliness for being prosecuted in the future. This is seen with our following examples. Contrary to popular belief, the end of the Jim Crow laws were not the end of segregational laws. As we can clearly see in the Terry v. Ohio verdict with the stop and frisk rule. Before that, it was generally understood that police could not stop and search or frisk someone without warrant given to them by a judge or court entity. But the effect of the stop and frisk rule changed everything, as the Terry decision proposed that as long as a police officer has a reasonable, articulable suspicion that someone is engaged in criminal activity and is dangerous, it was constitutionally permissible to stop, question, and frisk him or her, even in the absence of a probable cause, as long as there was some extent of consent. The Justice Douglas objected to the notion that police should be free to conduct warrantless searches whenever they suspected someone is a criminal, believing that this could be abused to extort people of color, and that the dispensement of the Fourth Amendment's warrant requirement risks opening the door to the same abuses that gave rise to the American Revolution. The sad reality of the stop and frisk rule is that it grants powers to officers that ordinarily need court orders, frisk, stop, question someone even in the absence of without a probable cause. And in many cases, this power is abused with feeble citizens who live in uneducated areas, and it just so happens to be many people of color. Thus, the government places a caste system in which the feeble-minded and which the people who are uneducated are suppressed under the government's authority.
A 14-year-old African-American boy who was named Emmett Till is widely known throughout the U.S. based on the torture he faced because of racist white people. He was a Chicagoan. At the time, the limitation between African-Americans and whites interacting with each other was stricter in the South. However, coming from up north, Till did not know about this. He interacted with whites all the time, and he was even close friends with some. As his story goes, while visiting family in Mississippi, he was accused of flirting with or whistling at a white woman in a store. Several nights after the incident had occurred, relatives of the white woman, Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam, abducted Till around 2:30 a.m. at gunpoint and beat him viciously and mutilated him. He was beat so severely that one of his eyes gouged out, but the torture doesn't stop there. Bryant and Millam ended their inhumane acts by shooting Till in the head, tying a large metal fan to his body, and throwing it in the Tallahatchie River. His body wasn't discovered until 3 days later, and his face was so unrecognizable that the only way of identifying him was because of the monogrammed ring he was wearing from his father. Till's mother had his body returned back up to Chicago, where she decided to have an open casket funeral to show everyone the kind of horror these men brought upon her son. Over 100,000 people came to see it. Bryant and Milam did end up going to court, but the jury consisted of white males only. They came to the consensus that both Bryant and Milam were to be found not guilty, although they were clearly responsible for murdering Emmett Till. They were not brought up to the stand to testify either. It is believed that Bryant and Milam did not go up to the stand in order to avoid telling the truth about whether they did murder the poor boy or not. However, after the trial, Bryant and Milam boasted about the murder that they did do. They were able to do so because they were already found not guilty. And there is a rule called double jeopardy that prevents an accused person or people from being tried again on the same charges following a valid acquittal or conviction.
This is Eric Garner, born September 15, 1970, in New York City. He was 6'3", weighing 350 pounds, so he was a rather large man. He worked as a mechanic in the city's horticultural department for many years, but he later came with some health problems, being asthma, sleep apnea, and complications of diabetes. So Eric ended up quitting his job, and he had 6 kids aged between 3 months and 18 years old. He was also known as the Gentle Giant, since regardless of his size, he was still kind. Being a diligent citizen, he stopped the fight, and police arrived to the scene shortly after. Then they accused him of illegally selling individual cigarettes, or as we know it, loose squares. What happened next was caught on video. I do advise these are some graphic images. Viewer discretion is advised.
The officers move in to arrest him. One of them puts his forearm around Garner's neck. More police join in, pinning him to the ground as he cries out.
Eric Garner was on video clearly murdered in cold blood, yet the officer claims the chokehold Eric Garner was placed on was clearly protocol, so that the officer not be pressed with any charges. Also, Eric Garner stated, "I can't breathe," clearly telling the officers they were blocking his airflow, causing him to die. There was no justice for Eric Garner since the officer served no jail time and was only fired for killing someone. In 2014, October 20th, in Chicago, Illinois, the 17-year-old African-American boy by the name of Laquan McDonald had been reported to have been behaving erratically while walking down the street, refused to put down the knife that he was carrying, and then continued to lunge at the police. Not long after this, the officer Van Dyke arrived to the scene, having shot Laquan McDonald 16 times, and then, unavoidably, killing him. The following program contains disturbing material that may be inappropriate to younger viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
I want to just warn our viewers what you are about to see is disturbing.
As seen in this autopsy, there was really no need to shoot Laquan McDonald 16 times. As we can see here, there were very minute places where he was shot at. There's a lot of discrepancy in where he was shot at. In all honesty, there is no reason to shoot one man 16 times. After all, we all know that 2, 4, maybe even 5 bullets is necessary to kill one human being. This over here shows where Laquan McDonald was shot, spins, and continues to fall. Jason Van Dyke had already had 8 early complaints, some of these being laughing at the hearing impaired, prior use of the N-word, unnecessary displaying of the firearm, and choking a suspect. It's easy to view these cases as individuals being deprived of their rights, but when individuals are deprived to the right to vote, being searched or stopped without a warrant, mutilated, or shot 16 times, when people live in fear, being stopped by the police for being African American, these cases become greater than a threat to individuals. This becomes a test of whether minorities are gonna be governed by fear of having these same events transpire to us as a community. If we're just going to accept a system that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent, then we can't claim it to be just. If we say we're committed to equal justice under law, to protecting the right of every citizen regardless of wealth, race, or status, then we must end racist ideas and policies of prejudices towards African American citizens, and in turn supporting policies that create racial equality and remove these racist policies and prejudices as a metastatic cancer they are, by surgically removing our racial prejudices and policies
from our government, and that is for the people and by the people.